You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com, where we have past podcasts, blogs, and a couple items for sale. So check us out, beardedtheologians.com. Thank you for listening, and enjoy this week's show. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast, hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold. And today we have a friend of the podcast and reoccurring guest, Chris. I said Chris.
I get Christ a lot.
I bet you do.
We autocorrect on emails. People are always real disappointed when it's just Chris.
Right. It's where we are in quarantine this morning. We have Chris Wilterdink with us this morning. Chris, tell us again, a little bit who you are, where you're from, what you do, and then we'll dive into this.
Yeah, you bet. It's great to be with you guys again. My name is Chris Wilterdink, and I'm the director of Young People's Ministries. I work at Discipleship Ministries, where we support and challenge the local church in their discipleship-making processes. I've been there for, somewhere between 8 and 10 years, depending on when you start counting. And I live in Franklin, Tennessee, where it is springtime. And so when the sun's out, we can escape quarantine and play outside as long as we keep our 6-foot distance.
Very good. It's still winter-ish here in Montana, so that's fun. But yeah, so we have Chris on today to talk about a handful of things regarding quarantine in the church and youth ministry. And there's a lot going on, and it's changing every day, it seems, if not more than that. And we were talking beforehand, there's a lot that goes on in the life of the church regarding youth and young adults and just the way we do things in the spring and this time of year. And we have to rethink a lot of that. So, Chris, in what you do, what are you all looking at preparing folks for in this season of quarantine?
So we are recording this at the end of March. It is March 27th. So I'm sure by now everybody knows that things seem to shift by the day or by the week. And so whenever this is posted, hopefully this is still relevant stuff. But the challenges are big time, right? I think that there's a growing appreciation for, teachers and mentors and those who serve young people, as parents are now quarantined at home. And, figuring out how to fill their students' days with, whether that's academic lessons or spiritual lessons or those kinds of things. So I've had some really interesting conversations with directors of youth ministries or campus ministers or young adult ministers about, how do you outsource and kind of virtually connect people so that they can continue to develop at home. The other really, really interesting one right now is related to the springtime rites of passage and how interrupted young people are feeling because of the quarantine. So in a nutshell, springtime, especially in the US, has a lot of things that feel like the culmination or the end of a journey, right? Like you've got school graduations, you've got plays or musicals or spring sports championships, those kinds of things that you've been working on all year. And normally you get to do those things and then have some closure because the thing happens and then move on into the summer or the fall or whatever happens to come next. And there's been this real interruption to those rites of passage. If students are home because school has been canceled, all of a sudden they don't get yearbooks. They don't get yearbooks to sign. If you're an older high schooler, you don't get to go to prom. There's all these things. You may not be able to walk in a graduation ceremony. If you're at a church and you're involved in confirmation, you may not get to do a confirmation service and actually join the church at the end of that thing. And even with that dynamic, it's really interesting because young people are experiencing that loss and feeling some sadness because of it. And at the same time, maybe a little bit hesitant to give voice to it because they know that there really is some other life and death stuff, right? Like the economic impact of quarantine and COVID-19 or however we say it, right? There's some real life and death stuff. Like people are getting sick, people are passing away. There's going to be this backlog of funerals. because churches want people to host those things. And so young people recognize that this is a big deal, and at the same time are experiencing this personal loss that feels like a big deal to them, but may be hesitant to give voice to it because they recognize the larger picture, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, I don't know, I find myself thinking a lot about our high school seniors, and just everything that goes into that, whether it's missing their last round of sports or band or choir or classes and graduating and walking. That's a huge deal. That's a significant moment in a young adult's life that is now just kind of gone in the wind, and not sure if it's ever going to come back for them. Because how do you move on and do something, confirmation and things like that, we can push those down the road a little bit, but not too far. And so how do we do these things that and continue to make them meaningful for people, and make their walk, whether it's in the church or in life, still deeply meaningful for them in these ways, when we can't gather. I don't know if that was really a question, but
well, and it's like,
I'm just processing what you said.
Well, and I was thinking about that. It's like our month of May here at this church is insane, because it's like, had it worked like we were initially planned, it was going to be confirmation one Sunday, and it was going to be Mother's Day one Sunday, and then graduation Sunday that next, and so we have those 3 Sundays that are just like chocked full of stuff. And so like sermon planning, I just plan almost not to preach, that we just, that's really what the services are about. But having to rethink, we're not going to be able to do confirmation now. We're not going to be able to do some of the things that we normally do in this season, like our senior dinner, is disrupted now. And so, we haven't even began to think about that sort of stuff yet, because it's not a reality. And as I bring that up, just kind of that, like, just like, trying to hold on, like maybe something will happen. Like, well, no, let's be real about this, that like, that even though the school has said they're not going to cancel graduation, it doesn't mean that we still can't, like that that's not going to happen like it has in the past. It may happen differently. And to be aware of how can we respond to that and still, do that. What will that look like in the future for us? I mean, that's kind of, I think, where everybody's at, and just trying to, spitball what ideas are out there.
And I think that's maybe the question, right? It's as far as concerning the church and how we do some of these rites of passage. What are some of the resources? What are some of the ways that we're encouraging our youth and children's and pastors to continue to engage in confirmation, in youth ministry, in children's ministry, to continue on towards these rites of passages?
Yeah, we've got kind of an evolving library of stuff that we've been posting on youthworkercollective.com. And those articles and kind of suggestions come from a variety of people that are active in youth ministries from around the United Methodist Church. And, specifically for some of the rites of passage stuff, we've been trying to get really creative. And I hope that these are a couple of good ideas, but I really hope that they seed better ideas from other people. Because, within a certain context, like depending on the amount of lockdown or isolation you're looking at, it requires a lot of creativity. And I really feel for not only senior pastors, but, really any church staff or volunteer who is all of a sudden getting all this extra stuff on their plate and trying to do things in a way that have never been done before, and feeling the weight of the responsibility of needing to be able to figure out something. Because something is almost always going to be better than nothing, right? Like, I guess that would be the suggestion that I give off the top. As you think about these things, it's okay to, follow the footsteps of the great theologian Anna from Frozen 2, and just say, you know what, I'm trying to figure out how to do the next right thing. That's okay. Do that next right thing, and then see what it leads to. Don't just do nothing. Say, oh my gosh, this is a huge problem, and then leave it. That's really not how it's going to work. But anyway, a couple ideas that we've come up with so far is trying to figure out something like a graduation parade, where maybe if you've got several graduating seniors at your church, you could divvy them up among people that are, not in high risk age categories, and have them drive to that graduate's house to deliver, kind of like the standard gifts or the letters or the traditional things that your church normally gives for graduation to kind of, keep some of that connection going. And live stream it, put it on your church's Instagram or your story or Facebook page or, whatever social media you use. Go ahead and live stream some of that stuff and have that be okay. If you're like me and have like a large set of digital photographs that you have not organized that are either personal or related to ministry, it's not a bad idea to like set that up in some sort of shared file, like on Imgur or Google Drive or something like that, and then have a small team of volunteers go through and try to tag specific events or faces or locations and put together like a virtual collage for somebody. And then you could either print that and deliver it to their house or, send it by, do an order on Walgreens or something like that and have that be a nice surprise as kind of a memory of, things that seniors have done over the course of time. But then also thinking about, the way that, Matt, I know you specifically mentioned like graduation Sundays and confirmation Sundays. And those are two great worship services where young people actually get to talk to the congregation and give some feedback about their faith formation and their experiences in the church. Mm-hmm. And so, issue the invitation for a young person, whether they're a graduating senior or an 8th grader or a college student or whatever, send in a 1 or 2 minute video clip of them talking about one of their favorite stories from being connected to the church or how that faith community has helped them grow and become a more mature disciple. And if you are doing like live streaming or, figuring out alternative ways to do worship, thinking creatively about how you can get young voices in those worship experiences. Even with social distancing, most young people are fairly tech savvy and could probably participate in reading liturgy from their house or, like I said before, sharing a testimonial, because generally those are very, very powerful parts of either a confirmation or a senior recognition Sunday. If you do have a awesome person around your church who puts together any sort of like senior tribute video or anything like that, totally okay to still do that and share that virtually on your social media platforms and figure out how, people can stay connected and recognize the next steps that those young people are taking. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
The very last one I was going to say is it's interesting to think about kind of the continued social connection. I know that we're using language related to social distancing right now, but really that means physical distancing, right? Like we need 6 feet of space between people. And I would challenge churches to embrace that idea of physical distancing, but recognize that you can still be socially connected even given a physical distance. To me, social distancing means a lot more isolation and not doing the kinds of things that we're doing now, like talking to people that you know well online and continuing to build relationship. And churches can still do that with young people. So figuring out ways to remain socially connected within the body of Christ while physical distancing is a reality.
Well, and that's why one of the things that we've been preaching here is connect to five people via, in any of the ways that you can digitally, call, whatever, however you need to connect to people, but encourage people every day to digitally at least connect or some way connect to 5 people. And so I've been kind of in my head making sure that I do that. And, I have kind of the way of doing that is just, on my phone, here's who I connected with today. And holding myself accountable to that, and then challenging our congregation to do the same thing. We found that very helpful. Now it's making sure that other people that wouldn't normally get connected with, and that's the hard thing within youth ministry, in a rural area such as mine, not everybody has the technology. My youth director has been struggling because not everybody in our youth group has the technology available to be connected. Yeah. And so, we're trying to figure out ways that we can do that in a safe way, because we're in the in-home, whatever it's called now, the in-home one where we really can't go out. Like, it's a ghost town out in our town today. Yeah. And so, how does that look when you don't have the connecting to digital, like in a space like a Zoom? And so that's been something that's been a challenge for us.
A low-tech idea that has come across for me is encouraging a congregation to adopt a youth where one person or two people, or however many you have, they each get a name from the youth group role. They get their physical address, and then they send them letters, or they send them care packages, right? Like you could send them quarantine care packages that have, I don't know, food that'll never go bad, apocalypse Twinkies and whatever. As well as, care notes and prayers and, those kinds of things. And, encourage somebody to send a care package once a month. If somebody's got the ability to print postage from home, and they've got, a dinky little shoebox or something, it'd be fairly easy to send out, a batch of cookies with a prayer and things to keep somebody busy, or remind them that they're connected to this larger church. You could also try to set up prayer partners or pen pals in that way, which could be really, really interesting. And if you are doing the low tech piece where you're trying to kind of adopt these young people, it's interesting to do the research from the Fuller Youth Institute, where they kind of do the inverse of safe sanctuaries recommendations. Like if you're doing safe sanctuaries when you're meeting in person, like you're recommended to have one adult for every 7 youth. If you can flip flop that ratio where you've got 7 adults that each adopt 1 youth and are sending them something once a month, that's going to give that youth one thing per week and remind them that they've got 5, 6, 7 people from their church that really care and remember that they exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's significant. Just thinking on all of those ways, right? I think today we focus so much on the digital. If we can connect through Zoom, we can connect through our cell phones and things like that. But that tangible, send something through the mail, low tech way of just saying, "Hey, we love you. If here's just a showing of that." That's significant, whether they can connect or not. We do that a lot with college students through our church. At the end of every semester, right before finals, we send big boxes of candy and geez, what do they send? They send just all kinds of stuff. There's
ramen.
always some grandmother that drops $1 or $2 in there, and they love it. It's just something that it reminds them that they're connected to a church they're far away from, that these folks love them dearly and are praying for them during finals time. Quarantine's not much different than that, just kind of buckling down and being in a space. And yeah, that's a pretty significant way to send some love.
And flipping it forward also, it's an interesting opportunity if you do have graduating seniors to help them make the connection for what is coming next, right?
Yeah.
Because they've missed out on that social closure for now, but they've got a really neat opportunity to get ahead of the social connections that will take place at the college or the university that they're going to go to. So if you have friendships or relationships with people in the college where they're going to go, can you connect them with a campus ministry? Can you connect them with a Wesley Foundation? If not, can you connect them with a United Methodist Church where that graduating senior is going to be in the fall, and let them get a jump on building some relationships with that community as well. Because that not only reminds them that they're connected with your church, the home church that they'll keep coming back to, but also give them the opportunity to grow and be connected with that cool new group of people that they don't even know exists yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that was one of the hardest things as a campus minister, was getting those names and getting those connections started. And what better time than now, out of necessity, right?
Well, and that's why I wanted to kind of transition this, now let's move forward to campus ministry, because that is one of the things you also connect with young people's division is campus ministers. And so what are some suggestions for campus ministers that may be out there that may be listening to this podcast, that some things that you're hearing, or something that would be helpful for them, because they're having to shut down, and they're almost, and it's a little bit harder because like in our university, we shut down, close the dorms, and so those kids disperse. And so what are some things you're hearing that are ways that campus ministers are connecting in, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for them, I know that we've mentioned social closure a couple of times so far, but that's been one of the really, really hard dynamics for campus ministries and folks that are involved with Wesley Foundations, because so many of the universities, when they made the decision, it was like, okay, the decision's made on a Thursday, you got to be out of the dorms by Sunday. And so you did not get to have, closing prayers or say goodbye to friends or do any sort of launching activities or those sorts of things. So generally what I'm hearing from campus ministers is that the college students that have been in their care in some ways are really struggling with the social isolation, and that can tend a little bit towards depression, you know, depending on uh, how things end up factoring into a young person's life. It's a really interesting thing to be able to look at, because really whether you are an introvert or an extrovert, this quarantine thing is hitting you in a really hard and different way. If you're an extroverted college student and you thrived in campus meetings and social gatherings and being able to, you know, go to parties or game nights or those kinds of things, all of a sudden you can't do that and you're missing out on it. If you're an introvert, you know, this might feel like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me, because now I can have my own time if I want to. And yet, if you're getting all these requests for like Zoom calls or phone calls and that kind of stuff, it can still feel like overwhelming because everybody wants to reach out so bad, especially in the first week or two of things, that it can also be really intimidating if you're an introvert. Um, so best ideas from campus ministries that I've heard so far, honestly, that stuff is still emerging and evolving, because just like the students, anybody that was, you know, living on campus, those campus ministers also are struggling to kind of figure out, how do we take care of our space? How do we close down the building? How do we keep it clean in the midst of everything else? And so for those students that still live somewhere near the campus ministry that they were involved in, you know, figuring out ways to be in conversation with the people or the persons that are taking care of the Wesley Foundation or the campus ministry space, and figuring out ways to support the care and closure of that space might be able to provide a little bit of the social closure for the experiences that are there. Um, I have heard several examples of people kind of doing like, you know, virtual prayer groups or Bible studies, or continuing, you know, what was like the weekly traditions, just without the food. Obviously, everybody's got to like BYOF, because you don't really get the free food for the gathering anymore. Something that has been freeing for campus ministries, and this would be for local church ministries as well, is like, you don't have to be stuck in the regular model of the nights and times that your meetings happen, right? Like if it was Tuesday nights at the Wesley Foundation, but that doesn't work for everybody anymore, all of a sudden, you know what, Thursday morning at 10 o'clock, totally okay. If that's the time that works better for everybody, have that conversation in your group and just, you know, live into the new times that work. Don't feel like you have to do a Wednesday night because you always did a Wednesday night. Don't feel like you have to do a Sunday morning because you always did a Sunday morning. Figure out the times and the places that, virtual places that you can connect and gather, and find the time that works the best. And really right now that's where the best stuff is happening. I wish that I had a few more tangible examples from the campus ministry front, but like I said, it's evolving fast.
Well, and
Yeah.
it didn't hit faster. Like it was harder than in the schools, because in the schools it's kind of been played out, and like most of them were on spring break, and it was kind of like, hey, you know, like, so we'll get an extended spring break, no big deal. But for college students, the hard part is a lot of them, you know, live on campus, and so like they were thrusted in this whole other, like it was, I mean, was listening to our you know, campus, and the way that our campus handled it was probably not the healthiest, but you know, it really cast some doubt and fear on how things were going to be handled. And, you know, and so, and it was thinking about that in the sense of ministry. You know, this is going to allow us to really rethink some of our programs at all levels, not just at the youth or, you know, college ministry area, but, you know, what are some ways that after this is done and we're able to get back together and you know, be physically closely, like what are some ways, like what can we take from this to continue some of the good things that came out of this, but also recognize that, you know, the reality is like we really need to meet physically, and that the digital space is not the end game. And that's been the conversation we've had at our church with communion, is that like we're not going to do online communion, because we believe in the physical presence of everybody being together and sharing in the meal together, not just in a sense of me, you know, encouraging people, all right, now pour your grape juice, you know, that sort of thing, like however it's going to be done. And I know people are going to do it, and, you know, God bless them for doing that. But like I felt, and my team felt, like the way that we feel about communion, it is a communal meal, and it's being present. And so that first Sunday that we get to come back, I mean, we're going to, we may put a table down the middle of the aisle of the sanctuary and just ask everybody to sit down. We're going to have a good old fashioned meal. I don't know, but I do believe that in this time, this is allowing us to rethink some of the things that we're doing and maybe looking at some possibilities of things that could be and not go back to some of the ways, some of the programming. We can say, we learned from this, like this, we can do some different things that aren't necessarily just linear that we've always done.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from you is something that I've had several conversations about, that this is the experience itself is going to allow us to really reflect on what is important.
Mm-hmm.
Because we will keep giving energy to those things that are important right now. And if we've got the time to reflect on that before we come back together in person, it could really help us to reshape and invest in those things that create the most meaning for each individual community. And so those things that are unimportant will tend to fall away a little bit. So in the midst of what we're going through right now, I think you're exactly right. Figuring out those things that are important, that give us life, that give us energy as a community. And then being able to breathe new life into those when we can add that physical closeness component to it again as well. It's an interesting chance to be able to do like a little bit of historical stuff, like the idea of a love feast, at least in terms of our own tradition and what that might look like in place of communion. For confirmation, with young people, that's another one where really, I feel like that's got to be an in-person thing. You can do some of the lessons and have the mentoring relationships and, do the study part of it virtually. But that celebration and that response to baptismal vows, that's an in-person thing. If somebody was to ask me, can I do a confirmation service virtually? I would say I really would not recommend it at all.
Right.
Well, and I think that that's like the thing that we need to name, is that there are some things that we cannot do through the digital space, and that's okay. Like, in adjusting and saying that, so like, let's use confirmation as an example, because that's the least controversial. That like, we really want people there to say that these kids are part of our congregation. And you can't, there are ways that you could do that, but it's not as meaningful. I mean, I remember for me, and the confirmations that I've done throughout my time, there's nothing been more powerful when the mentors and the congregation come and lay hands on those kids, and we pray we pray those prayers together, and there's just something so powerful about that you can't replicate through a screen. And I think that that's like the key is acknowledging when that is necessary, and acknowledging that right now in the digital space, we can't do that. And that's okay, that there will be a time when that will happen again. But until that time, let's be creative on how we can do some things, but acknowledge that this isn't the end game. Like, this isn't it. This is going to, that this is going to lead us back when we get together to make it even more joyous.
And let's think about the joy of the baptisms that you'll get to do in person, because you wouldn't do a virtual baptism either, right? Like, it just the theology that we've got would just not work with that. It's not that connection in that space that's there. Now, God is in all the places, right? Like, God is everywhere that we could possibly be, and so I am sitting in the presence right now, just like you are sitting in the presence right now. But that act of baptism and the welcoming into the community and the responding back, it's absolutely a physical thing.
Yeah. My hope with all of this, the parents, I've talked to a couple parents that are just busy. Typical parents, got a couple kids, the kids do a lot of things, the parents do a lot of things. And I've had several text me in the last 2 weeks and go, oh my gosh, I did not realize how busy we were. In this time, that we're forced just to take a breath and to rest and reevaluate what's important, what's not important, to have to do these things. It's been really nice. And they've hit almost a giant reset button of, here's what we have to do now, and we'll reevaluate the other things later. And my hope for the church world and for society as a whole, but maybe we'll get it in the church world, is that we take this opportunity, like you said, to reevaluate what ministries are important and life-giving to our church and congregation, and how do we continue to build on those. And maybe this is an opportunity for those that we need to let go and grieve and let die. This is the opportunity to do that. and let those go, and then birth into something new, whether it's through digital or physical space or both. How do we begin to take a look at that and do that and say, oh, here's where we're going now, and this has been an opportunity to go, okay, here we go.
Well, and that's been the conversation that you and I have had throughout this whole time, is that we feel like people are trying to do too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that they have to compensate. They have to have, something they have to have a live stream video every day. It's like, no, like, do you see your people that much, in a normal, when you were able to physically see them? Probably not. So you don't have to do a Bible study of Romans for the next, 20 weeks or whatever. Like, and I've been using the word, this is a marathon. And so we have to pace ourselves. We can't just like throw a whole bunch at people at one time, because they're trying to process and grieve what this looks like for them. And pastors and youth pastors, Zach and I are both former youth ministers. And so like, we totally understand you and have been there, and know that like, yeah, we want to connect to our kids and we want to find ways that we want to do it, but we can't overdo it. And if you're spending more hours trying to do the digital, then you're doing it wrong. Like, you really need to pace yourself and like, take care of yourself and your soul. And if you're not doing that, you're going to find yourself like you normally have been, and burned out. And like, I can't believe oh great, here it comes again. I got to hit go live on Romans 8. And you look like you've been through the ringer. Like, find ways to take care of yourself. I mean, that's the one encouragement I want to encourage people to really listen to. It doesn't matter what ministry field you're in, is that you have enough to do what you need to do for your space. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. Do what you can do well, and pace yourself, and be open to the possibility of how God can use you, even in those small spaces of distancing and all those other things that, even Zach alluded to. Like, really look at your schedule and ask yourself really what's important, which is kind of one of the things that we've talked about today. Analyzing ourselves, how are some ways that we, within the system that is right now, how can we do ministry within that? But we don't have to do everything. Like, I want to shake every minister from 6 feet, saying you don't have to do everything. Just pace yourself, and find ways to do that. Although, on the flip side, I've had more people attend my Bible studies digitally than they were in person. So it's kind of like, oh, this might be something we look into after we're done. So,
well, I know that we're not Lutheran, but you could take each of Martin Luther's 95 theses and do one a week. Boom, you're good for 2 years.
Right.
You're welcome. No problem. Planned.
Done.
You could do that and just say, well, here's what the Methodists would really think. Here's what Luther said. But
Sure.
Here's where Wesley disagreed with him.
We are part of the Protestant family, so it's
that's
okay.
Right.
You bring up an interesting point in terms of self-care. So this might shift gears a little bit, but as I think about one of the other struggles, particularly with youth ministers that we've talked to, is their concern and their worry, not only about the effectiveness of their ministry, but also like helping make ends meet, right? Like, I know that churches are paying a lot of attention to the financial side of things. So because you can't do physical offerings and physical collections, how do people continue to give and stay connected and feel like there is that giving, that spiritual component, but also value in return for those things? And for youth ministers, generally they're not the most well-paid positions anyway. Not that senior pastors are well-paid either. I think we could have a whole episode just on, better compensation for those that, give themselves to ministry or give themselves to teaching and education and those pieces. But generally youth ministers are part-time, and they usually have some other gig that they're trying to use to make ends meet, if that's, delivering food or being an Uber or a Lyft or, whatever it is. And so there's a general financial stress on top of that, like programmatic stress as well. And so I want to give support to, those youth ministers that are out there that are trying to figure out how to make ends meet, and remind them that they're not alone in those things. That, having a peer group that you can connect with, being in conversation with your senior pastors or your staff parish team about, financial issues that you may be personally looking at. It's okay to be able to talk about those things. Generally, we're not that good about talking about money usually. But I know that anybody that I'm connected with in my church family, if there's an issue that I can help with, because I still have a position where I am getting paid and I can work from home, I'm in a position to be able to give, and not loan. That's not a thing. Like, I am happy to be able to give and contribute to emergency funds at my local church. And I would hope that any church member or staff person, if they are in danger of economic, issues because of not being able to make ends meet anymore because of side gigs and whatever, have that conversation with your church and know it's okay. And don't be worried about any stigma that's attached to it. I think that's a big part of self-care. Don't feel guilty. There's so much unknown that's happening right now. It's okay to be able to bring up that, say, I don't know, and I don't know how I'm going to make my ends meet, and I need your help to do that. And generally, I think in the church, you're going to find people that'll be really creative in helping you figure out how to do that, whether that's with money or, delivering groceries or, any of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that's the thing, is it's an opportunity for us as leaders to be vulnerable, in a healthy way of, here's my reality too, right? Here's the reality of our community, and here's how we can help, or here's how I need help. And I think I think just being able to say, as pastors, as leaders, if we're in that position of thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this done? Say that out loud. Let your congregations know, because that may give somebody else permission in your congregation or your community who's in the same place to go, I need help too. And that may be more life-saving than anything else we do in this time of quarantine and having to stay home, and watching people be laid off, and watching people not be able to go get groceries, and just being vulnerable in those moments to go, I'm in the same boat. How do we do this together? And yeah, you're right. We have a whole church full of people who are loving and caring and generous, that may have an answer, that may be able to help, and they're just waiting to be asked, or they don't know, who needs help, and they're waiting to hear. And so if we can be vulnerable in those moments when we need to be, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. And without having the scripture in front of me, like the stories from Acts where the,
Mm-hmm.
first communities of disciples end up popping up.
Mm-hmm.
There's several lines about how they share,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how it works, right? Like, and that was isolated communities that were underground and, not part of the existing culture that was on top. So life was hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they got through by being able to share what it is that they had, and they had more than enough.
Yeah. This time this time that we are alive points back very much to the early church and how they had to go about doing things, sharing as all have need, gathering in small groups, doing the things that they could do to get by, and grow with one another. It's fascinating.
This may be one last little pivot or little thought that I've got, but I wanted to make sure to be able to share it before our time was up today.
Please.
And it has to do with young people not being in the riskiest category, for even if they are exposed to COVID-19. Generally, they're going to be okay, right? Like, they will feel sick, they're not going to feel well, but they are not in the high risk age categories. So it's also a really interesting opportunity to help young people think about, what they can do and what their part of this is. It probably is being able to listen and understand just how important the quarantine piece is, so that they are not carriers of that disease into a place that is a vulnerable population. But if somebody is young and healthy and has the ability to be a driver and do like a community grocery run and do shopping for like 5 or 6 people, that's a really cool way for them to be able to serve and figure out a way that they can advocate and be a part of a solution, as opposed to looking at a problem and not being able to help participate in it. So I would really encourage people to also be in those conversations with young people about helping them understand how they can advocate and play a part. And Matt, I think it was your thought about pastors or youth pastors trying to take on too much and do too many things. And I would encourage people to remember that it's also part of our job as leaders to equip others to go and do. It does not all have to be the pastor. It does not all have to be a staff person. People do have some time, and they're understanding what is important. And so giving them the tools and, maybe a venue to spitball and come up with a bunch of ideas for how they might be able to be advocates for healing and support within their own communities is really going to be a pretty amazing opportunity.
Absolutely. And those are, gosh, you're absolutely right. I keep seeing people my age and younger, or even a little bit older, of, oh, it's not going to affect us. We're going to go out and keep doing our thing. And it's like, no. You can still get it, and you're not going to feel great, but you're going to give it to other people, and you're going to take it into high risk places. And that's the last thing our communities need. Living in small rural communities, it could easily wipe out my 350 person population, easy. Who are mostly elderly and mostly at risk. I think about that deeply of, I have to stay inside. I've got to set the example and do these things too, because it's not worth getting my people sick, getting our communities sick. And so it's that awareness on top of how can I help in a healthy and responsible way. In knowing that all of our communities have elderly folk that it's not productive for them to go to the grocery store, but how can you go for them? How can you reach out and be that shopper for them, and do it in those ways that are healthy and helpful, rather than going to the beach or wherever else we're congregating in mass, hoping for the best.
Well, and that's kind of where we're at right now, is to really just be aware of, there are ways that you can serve, but do it in a safe and healthy manner, and be like Zach and I talked about using, there's an episode of Scrubs where they show how disease transmission happens very easily, and being aware of that. And the reason of washing your hands or hand sanitizing is so necessary in this day and age right now, and to be aware of that. And that's the one thing we definitely ask you to do, is to wash your hands and take care of yourself. Those are important things, especially in the world that we're in now. Chris, we thank you for your time, and you're always welcome to come back. You are definitely the most seasoned person to be on this show. Not meaning that you're the oldest person on the show, but almost. And for that, like you said, we'll find you an ugly jacket to wear, so you can wear it around proudly.
I was gonna say every other time that I come on.
Every other time, yeah. And so we thank you. Encourage you to go to our website at beardedtheologians.com and check out all of our great content, and also check out Discipleship and all the great content that they have in regards to discipleship for all ages. But if you're looking for youth, the youthworkercollective.com is a great resource. I mean, I'm constantly sending my youth director there for things, and she's like, I've already looked at it, and like, makes me feel good that she's already looked at it. But it's always they have some really great content up there for all sorts of things going on even now, and maybe things you can plan for the future. So for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out. Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.